Welcome. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris. I'm a bookseller here at Boswell. The first thing we always like to do is let you know that today is day 5,184 that Boswell's been here and in business. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jenny Chou, to do some introducing.
Hello, friends. Welcome. I'm so glad to see everybody here tonight. I'm so excited to be in conversation with Claire Fuller about her writing life and her latest book, which is her fifth novel, The Memory of Animals. Claire has won the Costa Award, which celebrates English language books written by writers based in the UK and Ireland. And she has been shortlisted for the Women's Prize, which, according to their website, is the UK's most prestigious annual prize honoring fiction written by women. So good job.
Thank you.
In addition, Publishers Weekly gave The Memory of Animals a starred review, saying, Fuller crafts a haunting novel of second chances set in a near-future pandemic. The entwined pain and pleasure of memory is at the heart of Neffy's story, as is the hard work of establishing trust and finding forgiveness, particularly for oneself. Claire, welcome to Boswell. You're visiting us from your home in Winchester, England. First, can you tell us where that is?
It's about an hour southwest of London, but actually last summer I moved 4 miles outside Winchester into a tiny little village, into a converted chapel. So it's very nice.
Does that sound interesting? And I hear you have goats as neighbors.
I do, yes. Goats who like rose hips.
Have you been on book tours in the U.S. before?
I came to New York in 2017 for swimming lessons, and I did an event at McNally Jackson and just toured New York bookshops. So this is my first time in Milwaukee. I'm trying to say it like rather than Milwaukee.
Yes, if you'd like to sound like us, you say Milwaukee.
Milwaukee.
So I'd like to ask you to read a little bit, but before you start, without giving too much away, tell us about your main character, Neffy, who is a truly unforgettable character. I know it's an understatement to say she has a lot of problems, but what is her biggest problem in the book?
Well, yeah, which is her biggest? She feels a lot of guilt for things she should have done with her family. But in a way, the impetus that kind of kicks the novel off is because she did something with for her employer, which her employer was not very happy with. I'm trying to say it without spoilers. She's a marine biologist. She works with octopuses. She made a bad mistake. Well, you could maybe see it as a good one, but her employer was not very happy. She owes them a lot of money, so she signs up for a vaccine trial in London.
We'd love to hear you read a little bit.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to. I need to just tell you, just kind of fill you in a little bit on the story for those who don't know. So Neffy signs up for this vaccine trial while there is a pandemic in the rest of the world. And she goes into a unit in London and she needs to stay in isolation for, I can't remember, 2 or 3 weeks. And there's 17 other volunteers and doctors and nurses in this unit. And she's given the vaccine, she's given the virus. She has a very bad reaction and she's more or less unconscious for 2 or 3 days. And when she wakes up, the world has turned without her. And the virus on the outside has got much worse. And all the doctors and nurses in the unit have left. And all the volunteers, apart from 4. And so she wakes up to 4 strangers. And she knows that something is off. Something is not quite right. And that's probably all you need to know for this reading. There are also octopuses. I'm sure we'll get to octopuses. When I wake properly for the second time, I feel better, cooler, more rested. In fact, the room is chilly and I pull the duvet up to my chin. The items on the bedside table still haven't changed position. The empty water jug and the plate the mug with vaccine biopharm on the side. The box of pills is there and the interior blind is still down. The picture of the CNN building has gone from the TV screen and now shows only white text on a black background. Sorry, something has gone wrong. I lower myself off the bed and go back to the exterior window, dragging the duvet with me. The air conditioning is blasting out a fresh breeze, but it's sunny outside, maybe midday, and when I stare again towards the east, the sun is still rising, only now with a cloud of dark smoke above it. I look, but there's nothing else to see, and no one is in the alleyway, not even any more deer, and no cars or people past the far end, no sirens sound. Using the wall as a prop, I go to the bathroom and stick my head under the tap and drink, gulping down air and water, stopping to belch and then drinking again. I grip the edges of the sink and look in the mirror. I am shocked to see a whole real human being, as though I were expecting to no longer have a structure. No skin containing bone, but instead something more fluid, slippery, a liquid body that could flow into a dark corner, a desk drawer, a shoe, a drain. My face is even rounder than usual and my skin is dry. I have dark circles around my puffy eyes and the flesh here is tender when I prod it. And when I pull up my top, the colour of my chest is yellowish green. My stomach too, as though a bruise from a fight I have forgotten about is disappearing, one that covered my entire body. Back in my bedroom, I press my ear to the adjoining wall, listening for the Irish girl laughing or the sound of her TV, but I don't hear anything. How long is it since I've been outside this room or someone has come in? Time has folded in on itself, corners and triangles overlapping and forming dark pockets, and now that I'm trying to uncrease it, it is flattening into a different shape. I make my way around the bed to the door, and I press down on the handle, slowly, silently. I don't know what I'm expecting on the other side. I only know that something is very wrong. There is no noise in the corridor, no chatter of the nurses at their station, no rattle of Mike's trolley. The handle depresses, but the door won't open. I turn the twist lock and its clunk is loud, but still the door doesn't release. I give it a final tug and then let go. I try to remember how the door is accessed from the outside. It seems so long since I came in here with Boo. Did she have a key card which she waved in front of a reader or pushed into a slot? Have they locked me in because I was given the virus and tried to leave? That can't be right. I would be given food. I would be checked on. Hello, I say, my cheek pressed to the door, too quietly for anyone to hear. No answer. I pull the duvet closer around my neck and consider pushing the emergency button above the bed or shouting, banging on the door. My fist is raised, about to thump, when the thought arrives. Not that I'm unsure about who might come, but that no one will.
What a wonderful beginning. I love the expression that you used, time has folded in on itself. And I think we can all relate to that, having been through a pandemic, and it did feel like that, like time almost stood still. Did you start crafting this book with the intention of writing about a global pandemic, or did it just come about because you wanted to explore certain themes like compassion, or how circumstances will bring out the best in some people and the worst in others? Or maybe you had a completely different reason for starting your book.
Yeah, well, I started this novel in September 2019. I thought, what a great idea. We'll write a pandemic novel. So yes, quite prescient. And you can blame me, everybody, for COVID-19. No, so in September 2019, or around about then, a friend of my son's came around to the house and happened to be telling us about a thing called flu camp. I'm sure you have the equivalent here. I'm not sure what it's called. But it's a drug trial that you sign up for. You're given the flu vaccine, you're given the flu virus. You have to stay in isolation in a room in London for in a medical centre for 2 weeks. And basically they're testing the flu vaccine. If you might get flu, you might not. You are paid, I think, about £3,000 for doing this. So lots of students do it. And James was telling me this, and I just thought, oh, that's such a great idea for a novel. Somebody goes and is given a vaccine and a virus while there is a pandemic in the rest of the world. You know, they're testing vaccines for a pandemic. And in fact, I thought it was such a great idea that I signed up for flu camp myself for research. And the first test they do is a psychological test. So they phone you up, you have a telephone call with them, basically seeing whether you are psychologically fit to be in isolation, which I think is kind of ironic because we were all often, you know, in some kind of isolation during COVID, but nobody tested us, did they, to see whether we were capable of it. But and then I went up to London and was given, or blood was taken in order to kind of see whether I was suitable. And it turned out that I wasn't, because I had too many antibodies, too many flu antibodies. So I was rejected, which I was really disappointed about. You know, what could be better than sitting in a room for 2 weeks, which is what I do anyway, and then be paid for it.
Well, I was thinking isolation for 2 weeks would be a great time to read all the books that are piled next to my bed.
Yes, and be paid £3,000.
Be paid for it.
Yeah, so I never think of themes first. I think of a person in a place, a situation, and I start writing without any idea of where it's going to go. I don't plot. I have no plan. I don't know how it's going to end. I just had Neffy in the car driving to the unit. That's how the book starts, really. Although it does start with a letter, but in the original draft, she's driving to the unit. She's shown her room. You know, there's all that stuff without knowing at all what the outcome would be.
So some of the most vivid and memorable scenes are set in the past in Greece, where Neffy's father lives and where she visits every summer. Do you have a connection to Greece that made you choose that as a setting?
No, but there was a reason why I chose it. So in the novel, Neffy uses a piece of new technology called a revisitor, which allows her to go back and see her own memories, inhabit her own memories, age 27. So she can see the world slightly differently because she's inhabiting her 8-year-old body or her 14-year-old body, and seeing what happened, remembering. And her father owns a hotel on the island of Paxos in Greece. But before I knew all that, I just thought I wanted some of Neffy's memories in there. And so I started writing a memory of her in an English garden. And then I suddenly thought, really doesn't have to be England. Where would I like to go in order to do some research? Well, I've never been to Paxos. So I decided to set it there. And from that kind of grew the fact that she is a marine biologist, because she, as a child, snorkels in the sea off Paxos, sees an octopus, kind of falls in love with octopuses, becomes a marine biologist, which also sets off a whole kind of strand of the novel. So I had decided on Paxos, and I thought, well, I'm going to have to go to do my research. Thank you very much. And I booked a trip to go, which got cancelled because of the pandemic, and then rebooked and cancelled and rebooked and cancelled about 4 times. So when I was finally able to go, the book was finished. So it turned into a fact-checking trip rather than a research trip. And I did some snorkeling and I didn't see an octopus. I still had a lovely time.
Other than not seeing an octopus, was it everything you had hoped it would be?
Yes, I had watched as many videos as I could find on the internet of people, mostly on holiday on Paxos, and people snorkeling, and lots of octopus videos. The one thing I think that I was able to change, because I had finished the story, but I could change just little bits, was the smell, which you cannot obviously get from watching videos. So, and the feel of the sun and the noise of the wind and the animals and the insects, that kind of stuff you can only get, I think, by going there. And so I was able to put tiny little extra bits in about that because I had gone. So it was useful in the end.
I think that's one of the most interesting parts of the book is the details that you put in about the octopuses. So what's the most interesting thing you learned about octopuses doing your research?
Oh, so many things. The thing I really am fascinated by is that their bodies are so fluid that they can fit through the smallest hole, only limited by the size of their beak. So octopuses have a beak which is made of cartilage, and it is actually a beak. It's in the middle of all their arms, and they use it for cracking shells on crabs or whatever else they're eating. But there is some video that I remember seeing where there's an octopus in one tank, there's food in another, and there's a tube that runs all the way around from one tank to the other, and the tube is only that wide, and the octopus squeezes through it, just becomes really, really, really long, but only limited by the size of its beak. But there are so many that I could. Octopuses have a brain shaped like a donut that their intestines run through the middle of. They have 3 hearts, blue blood. Some of them only live for a very, very short time. The giant Pacific octopuses lives the longest, which is, I think, about 3 years. But that's the longest. Lots and lots of facts.
Were you able to go snorkeling anywhere else since then? Have you ever seen an octopus in the ocean?
I haven't seen an octopus in the ocean, and I'm sure as a child I probably saw octopuses in aquariums, but I can't remember that. So in February I went to Winter Institute, which is a kind of conference for booksellers. And I went in Seattle, and I went to Seattle Aquarium, and I saw my first octopus in the aquarium, and it was absolutely incredible. It was all its suckers were stuck to the glass, and it just kind of rippled. It was a giant Pacific octopus. I just stood there for about an hour while all these kids were running around and around just to watch this creature. Yeah.
Well, I read your book right about the time of spring break, and I was out in San Diego, and we went to the aquarium out there. And I remember specifically looking for the giant Pacific octopus, and I finally did. They do have one. And it was the same thing. The suckers were stuck to the window, and that's all I could see of the octopus.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always loved them, and I've always been fascinated by cephalopods, which are octopuses, squid, cuttlefish, ammonites, probably lots of other creatures. And before I was a writer, I worked in marketing, but before that I was a sculptor, and I would sculpt big pieces of stone and wood. I would carve them, and I would carve cephalopods, really. Lots of squid and octopus and ammonite shapes, really, for the shapes of their arms, the shapes of their tentacles, the shapes of ammonites, that circular shape. And I became so obsessed by them that when I was 40, before I even started writing, I got my first and only tattoo of an ammonite. I'm not going to show it to you. So when Neffy I wrote her as a marine biologist, it just seemed quite a natural job for her to do for me, something that I've always been interested in.
I'd like to ask you about the cover of the book. And I think that this cover is just so striking. In fact, I remember reading it and just spending time looking at all the different details on the cover. And then just to compare, today I Googled what the UK cover looks like.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so different.
Very, very different. Yeah.
What do you think the thinking was behind the American cover and the UK cover? What do you think each one is trying to convey?
Well, the American cover, which I absolutely love, is a hyper-realist painting by a woman called Lisa Erickson. So it really looks like it is created on a computer, but she paints them. And you can find her on Instagram. She's called Aqualisa on Instagram. And she paints lots of mammals in the sea where they shouldn't be, or underwater where they shouldn't be. And Tin House, my American publisher, or the art director, I think, at Tin House, they are based in Portland, Oregon. And as far as I understand it, the art director was walking past a gallery in Portland, and she saw this painting in the window, and she said, that's the cover. That's the cover. Because there is a section in the novel where, London, the world has gone to pot. And Neffy looks out the window in central London and she sees a deer walk down the road, because all the humans have gone, really. And the animals are beginning to take over or have the potential to come back. So the fact that there is a deer standing on coral and the coral is growing up its legs, I think it's also, for me, this is about, as well, it being a beautiful painting and picking up on those ideas. I think it's about things being almost in the wrong place. That's how I see it, Neffy and these humans surviving where maybe they shouldn't be because they're not in their natural habitat. They are in a hospital unit. So that's the American cover. The UK cover, again, I mean, what happens generally is that my editor emails the cover to me and says, we worked really hard on this, we hope you like it. So I don't have much opportunity to say I really don't, but I really do love this one. And I think really they're just trying to pick up on Neffy and all the book's wateriness. I think that's as far as it goes with that one. And maybe because the water cuts through her face and the top of her head is just a reflection of the bottom of her head, so you can't see her whole face. So it just makes it like there is something slightly off. This is not just a woman having a nice time in the bath. You can look and you just see a woman underwater, and then you look again and you think that's not quite right, which is how I feel about this novel, really.
So you said before you became a writer, you were a sculptor.
That's right.
So when was your first inkling that you might also be a writer?
Oh, not for many years. I wanted to be a sculptor. That I think it's harder to be a sculptor than to be a writer, actually, to earn some money from it. So I went into marketing, and I've always been a reader, read many, many books, and still read a huge amount. But it has never occurred to me to be a writer. It was just not something on my agenda. I kind of thought that books were written by someone unlike me. And also books, I didn't understand how books got written. I thought they came out of a writer's head, kind of fully formed. I knew nothing about editing. And for me, all my novels are created in the editing rather than in the first draft. So it was not something I was thinking I've always wanted to be a writer. But when I was around about 40 and I met my husband, who's here tonight in the back there, we decided to do some art projects following Miranda July, which I'm sure lots of you will recognize that name, an actor, filmmaker, scriptwriter. She had written a book called Learning to Love You More. And Tim and I decided to do lots of the projects that this book specified. And you had to do whatever the project was, take a photograph of it, send it off to her website. It got uploaded. And then eventually the whole website was sold to the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco. So Tim and I did lots of these things. And so one example is Tim made a placard that said, "Less driving, more walking." Great big sign. And he went and stood in the middle of 4 lanes of traffic in a city called Reading in the UK while I took photographs, and he held up the traffic. And then we ran away. And we did lots of these things. And really what I learned was they were really out of my comfort zone. You know, I didn't like doing them, but I liked the feeling of having done them. And so then we did all the ones in this book that we were capable of doing. There were some that we couldn't do. So take a photograph of your parents kissing. Both Tim's parents and my parents are divorced, so that was not going to work. So we did them all. I was looking around for more projects that would give me that feeling. And in my local library, they had a thing called a short story slam. And anybody could sign up for it. You had to write a short story and read it out to a paying audience. It had to last no longer than 5 minutes. And the audience voted on their winner. And if you won, you got a share of the door's takings. So I had not written a short story since, I don't know, I was 40, not written one since I was probably 16 at school. So it really was out of my comfort zone. And also really to read it out was terrifying. So I wrote a story, I read it out. It was a very bad short story and I read it out very badly and I didn't win. But I entered, it happened every 6 weeks or so, this event, and I wrote another and I entered, re-entered. And then after about a year, my story was voted the winner. And I got £9.87.
Wonderful.
And then I decided to do an MA in creative writing, or MFA. And I wrote Our Endless Number Days on that course. So that's kind of how it all happened. And I still wake up in the morning and think, oh my God, this is my job. You know, how is this my job?
Do you still work as a sculptor?
No. I still have lots of lumps of stone sitting around my garden, and I still have my chisels and my mallets, but I feel like my kind of creative need is satisfied by the writing. You know, maybe one day I'll want to go back to it, but I don't have any desire.
And then who is your first reader when you finished a draft?
I'm in a writing group There's 10 of us. And in fact, it's been going since I did the MA in creative writing. So, 12 years or so. And we meet every month and we swap work. So I read their work, they read mine as I'm writing it. So they usually get about a chapter at a time. So in a way, they're my very first readers. But the book changes significantly in that time. So first readers of the finished novel is probably my husband, my 2 children, a couple of people from this writing group. They were the people who read The Memory of Animals first. And actually, it was very useful. With my 2 children are in their 20s. And all the main characters in this novel are in their 20s. And that's quite a while ago for me. So to put myself in Neffy's head in contemporary Britain was quite hard to do. What language do people in their 20s use? So my children reading it and critiquing it and giving me very blunt feedback was really helpful. My daughter, I really remember one of her comments was, "Mom, people in their 20s do not say making love." And then she told me all the other words that I should
They
be
were able
using
to give you the
instead.
right vocabulary.
Yes. Thank you very much.
I was so fascinated by the idea of a revisitor. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works and how you came up with that idea?
Yeah, so it is a piece of new technology that obviously doesn't exist in our world. If it existed in our world, I probably wouldn't be a writer. I would be selling a revisitor. And it could have just been flashbacks. And at the very beginning, in the very early draft, or the first draft, that's kind of what I was writing, flashbacks of Neffy revisiting her time in Paxos. But then for various reasons, I decided to actually change that and make her revisit her memories. And the reasons were really that when you write a flashback, it's often very kind of either ephemeral or it's about the character's flashback with a particular person or a particular event. What you don't get from a flashback, either writing it or I think reading it, is a real sense of the place in all the full senses. Its smells, its tastes, what it's like to be there, its heat, its weather. And I realized as I was writing flashbacks that I wanted to be able to put that in because Neffy and these people are stuck in this unit for, I didn't know how long it would be. And I wanted to be able to release the reader from that place. And flashbacks weren't providing that enough. So the revisitor helped provide some release from almost the claustrophobia, I think. But then, of course, you can't just have a revisitor for the sake of that. It has to also very much tie into the plot. There has to be a very good reason in a plot way to have such a piece of technology. So I can't say why, but in a way that the revisitor does create or provide the answer to the central mystery, I suppose, and allow Neffy to understand what is going on in this unit by her revisiting some memories.
And the way you describe it using the revisitor is really like being there in the moment that you were in, however many years ago, 15 years ago for her, with all the smells and the feelings that you had at that moment, even things that maybe Neffy doesn't remember come out using the revisitor. And I thought that was so interesting. So if you could revisit a place, what would you revisit?
This is interesting because before I sat down here, I was talking with the science fiction group at Boswell's who have read this novel, and we were talking about what would we revisit, and I think I would revisit the moment when, or the last time, my children held my hand or sat on my lap, because that there must have been a final time, but you are just not aware of it. One moment they will sit on your lap and then never again, and you don't notice that passing. And I would love to be able to have that moment back and kind of hold on for a little bit longer. But some others in the group, and I'd really be interested to hear what people would say, but some others in the group, I think this gentleman over here suggested maybe revisiting the first date with his husband, because you don't necessarily know that it's going to be a significant relationship, but to be able to go back and see it in a different way.
And so many of us are nervous, and maybe we don't remember.
Yes,
everything.
We don't remember. No, my husband and I, we do this thing where we take a photo a day, and we've been doing that for something like 9 years. Just one photograph, or we choose one if we take lots of them, and then at the end of the year we get them made into a book, every photo of that from that year. Just one day. But we started 8 or 9 years ago, and this year we've been married 10, and we met 15 years ago. He's nodding. I got that right. And we often say, I really love if we had taken a photograph on our first date. But then, of course, if one of us had been doing that project and said, could I take a photograph? Then the other one would never have wanted to see them again, because that would be so weird. But yeah, so it's kind of like being able to go back to those moments. What about you, Jenny? What would your moment be? Put you on the spot.
No, I've been thinking about this ever since reading your book, and there's so many parts of my life that I might want to revisit, but I think that that very special time would be the days after my first daughter was born, because to me it's all just such a haze. I really can't remember. I was so tired, and I don't remember the details, but I'd love to see those details, how tiny her fingers were, and her toes.
Yeah, I think it's those really special moments, or people talk about the moments when somebody was close to them was dying, to be able to go back there, because sometimes those particular moments are, the emotions are so heightened, aren't they, that we don't notice things. We don't notice the details.
I'd love to open it up to questions now. Is there anyone who has a question?
Or tell me where you'd like to revisit.
Oh, yes, we'd love to hear that too. Yes, go ahead.
I think that but it's so nice when you have a surprise. You're expecting something and you get something a little bit different.
It must have been a bit of a shock. Oh, okay, no spoilers. Oh, well, that's nice to hear. Thank you for coming.
Any more questions?
There's one.
Yes, in the back. Go ahead.
Yes, that's quite interesting. The memory of animals had a difficult journey, I guess, in terms of titles. I first called it This Is Only a Test, after the early warning system in San Francisco, because Neffy visits San Francisco. I went once, and there was, sirens over the city, and then this kind of American B-movie voice says, "This is a test. This is only." In fact, I might. Please, will you say it for us? See, so much better than I can't do. I can't do an American accent, but so it was called that. But then my UK editor bought the novel, Penguin, and said she really loved the novel, but that title she didn't think would work because if people Googled it, they would come up with exam textbooks or something. So then I had to think of a new title, and I came up with A Body of Water, because octopuses are mostly water. They live in the sea or they live in tanks. And also the virus in this novel is to do with bodily swelling, so water retention in a way. So it worked on that level as well. And my UK editor said, yeah, we love it. That's fine. That's great. And then Tin House in the US bought it and they said, we love this novel, but we can't have that title because we've only just published a novel called A Girl is a Body of Water. So it was really getting close to the deadline, you know, when they need to announce it, when they need to start designing the cover, all that kind of stuff. And so my two editors and myself got on Zoom and we were just chucking all sorts of names and words around. And eventually the memory of animals stuck. So that was kind of hard work. And in fact, all the titles have been hard work for one way or another, apart from Our Endless Numbered Days, which I stole from Iron and Wine, a band from one of their albums, because titles aren't copyrighted. So but I do acknowledge him that I stole his title, but all the others had all sorts of difficulties as well.
Well, you came up with a wonderful title.
Oh, thank you.
Any other questions? Can you share with us? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you have a favorite of your novel?
Lots of people always ask me that, and I feel like if I say any other except the last one, it means I'm getting worse. But you know, I really love Neffy in this novel, and I'm really proud of this novel. But I also have to say I really do love Unsettled Ground, the previous one, mostly because of Jeannie in that novel, who can't read and write, basically. And to write her as a writer and somebody who loves to read was the hardest thing. To write a character to which it is very difficult, when to me I take it so much for granted, or I did in the past. So to write her, maybe it's not that book is my favorite, it's just Jeannie is kind of still in my heart, I suppose. Yeah.
Can you share with us what you're working on now?
Yeah, I'm about 40,000 words, so about halfway through the first draft of the next novel, but I never plan any of them, so I don't know what the next 40,000 words are, but I think it's set in 1987, and it's a woman looking back to when she was 16 in that year, and she works in the post room of the art school in Winchester. So, and I think she becomes a very famous sculptor, which clearly I didn't. And she is so an outsider looking in, because to begin with, she certainly isn't an art student. But it starts, I can't remember the first line exactly, and it might well change, but it's something like she addresses the reader. So she says something like, you're exactly the same as all the rest. You're just like all the police and the psychologists and the counselors and the detectives. You all just want to know where I put the body. But of course, I wrote that and I thought, oh, I don't know who the body is or where she put it. So I'm writing to discover that. Yeah.
Well, now we all want to know where she put the body.
Yeah, but me too.
Besides that, are there any other questions? Okay, why don't we sign some books?
Very happy to. Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here, Claire. It's great.